Hi, everyone. This is Trish Kendall, your host for the Choose and Become interview series. So I am incredibly excited today. This interview with Natalie has been on the books for a long time. And I keep looking at my calendar going, when am I interviewing Natalie? When am I interviewing Natalie? And it's finally come. So very quickly, I want to introduce Natalie, and then I'm going to take a step back before we move forward. So Natalie Guillen, will you just say hi?
Hi, everyone.
So Natalie is the CEO of Advent Coaching, which I'm hopeful we're going to get into a little bit about how that name was created. So I might ask you that later. She's an executive coach, a professional certified coach, coactive certified coach, and an MBA from Stanford University, GSB. But mostly, she's a mom. She's a mom of 5-year-old Sophia, a wife, a friend to me, and I'm so excited to have you here today.
Well, I'm super thrilled to be here with you, Trish. Thank you for having
So the
me.
whole purpose, and Natalie knows this, that the purpose of this interview series is to, how about this? I'm going to take the step back. I've made 5 critical choices on my journey from the pit of despair to the peak of success, what I consider enduring success. And I started this interview series so that I could grab some lessons and experiences and nuggets from people who inspire me. And Natalie and I met at her wedding. So we might get into that later. But Natalie, you and Brian, your husband, came to visit us in Boston a number of years ago, and you shared your origin story with me. And I was blown away by you. And I continue to be blown away by you every time we interact with each other. So the purpose is to guide the interview using these 5 choices, but in your life, so that I can take your voice and some of your lessons and share it with my community.
Thank you.
All right, so Natalie, I'm going to stop and I'm going to pass this over. Will you share a little bit about yourself to our communities?
Thank you. Thank you, Trish. Yes. So I am Natalie Guillen. I am the CEO of Advent Coaching. It's an executive coaching firm and leadership development company. We support business leaders to become more effective in their roles, in a nutshell. Now, prior to that, I built my career in Silicon Valley in fintech, and but it was a journey to get to where I am today. I was born in Peru, born and raised, and lived through a period of terrorism during the 80s and early 90s, which prompted for my brother and me to move to the US without our parents. So from which was really interesting. In Peru, at a macro level, things felt very unsafe. At a micro level at home, things were very safe, loving, nurturing household. Come to the US, things flipped. The US pre 9/11 was felt very safe. People were saying what hi on the streets. And yet at a micro level, the environment where we were living was not, didn't feel healthy. So I wanted to leave my circumstances as fast as possible. And that prompted me to go to college and continue to on that trajectory to get to where I am today.
And thank you for trusting me and my community for sharing that, because it's not something that you very broadly share. So I hold it. I hold it with me. So
Thank
let's
you.
go to this. Everybody has their own definition of success. What does create enduring success mean to you?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. My definition of success has evolved over the years. When I moved, it was about survival, right? It was about get out of my circumstances into healthier circumstances as fast as possible. It was about giving myself being able to cover those basic needs of shelter and food. As I progressed in my career, it was about recognition. It was about, getting promoted. It was about higher income, about ability to do things that I wanted to do with friends. And as I've continued to evolve as a human being and as a professional, now it feels more about impact. My definition of enduring success is being having a healthy relationship with myself in alignment with my core values. It is about having healthy relationships with my loved ones, and it is about making an impact through my work so I can leave this world better than how I found it.
And I have read recently how you just had your reunion at Stanford for your MBA.
Yeah.
And so I have been drawn into some of your reflection around that and finding your purpose through the years and making sure that you stay true to it and you helping others do the same. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
The first critical choice that I made on my journey was to pick up the phone when my sister called. Now, for me, that was a first choice that was profound because it saved my life, but it was also practical. And I've since made other practical first choices. And I learned that success begins with making a first choice. So when you reflect back on your journey, what is a first choice that you made that has impacted your enduring success?
The first choice that I made was when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. So I was already in the US. I hated my living situation. The environment was not healthy, as I mentioned. And if anything, rather than being neutral, it was
Yeah.
negative. So the first choice I made for myself was get to college. It was at that time the easiest, fastest ticket for me to change my life. And but it was not easy. In order to get to college, I needed to learn how to speak
Right.
English. You know, I was going to classes at night, additional ESL
As a high
classes.
school
My
student.
brother, as a high school student, my brother and I were going to classes on the weekends at community college, free classes to learn how to speak English because I knew I had to do that in order to be able to be successful
Mhm.
here in the US. And by success, at that time, I didn't mean like rocking it. I meant just getting
College.
out and being able to be
Yeah.
my own and feel normal. Uh,
Mhm.
so um, I was working three jobs in order to support myself because I had to support myself. So it wasn't easy, but it had to get done. And in order for me to Tony Robbins says, if you want to be happy, that you need to um, change your circumstances or how you feel about your circumstances. Those were not circumstances I was willing to accept. So I needed to change my circumstances. And that was the first choice I made for myself.
The second critical choice that I made was to commit to a two-way agreement. And that two-way agreement was between me and my sister. It was close to a contractual agreement. What I learned is that the power is in committing. And when we do, whether that two-way agreement is with our spouse or our child or our client or our boss, if we commit actions that may start out as, I have to do this, can transform to I want to do this. You are in the business of two-way agreements. So, I mean, you're constantly with your clients in two-way agreements, but I'm not going to lead the witness here. I want to start with when you think about your life, your whole life, even from when you were in Peru, is there a two-way agreement that you entered into that the commitment of that agreement impacted the success?
Yes, I've made two-way agreements throughout my life. I would say there are two that are very significant to me where I pivoted significantly. The first one was I mentioned I was in high school and my brother and I went to the mall and my first time at the mall and it was so different from Peru. You know, everything was clean and big and pretty and light. And I saw this pair of boots, black boots, and I fell in love with them. They were on the window of a store. And my brother saw me looking at them and he said, "Do you like them?" do you want them? I said, yeah. I thought he was going to buy them for me because he was my older brother. And he said, if you want them, work for them. So, and let's not ask our parents for anything. Let's not ask them for money. They're in Peru. We have a younger sister. They're dealing with a lot. So I just thought, wow, we're not in Kansas anymore. Like we're not in Peru anymore. Things have changed. So now if I want anything going forward, I need to work for those things. So that was the first two-way agreement between my
Yeah.
brother and me. And another one, which actually came much later in my career, it was with a coach, actually. I was in a place in my career where I knew I needed to change. I wanted to realign with my values. And I made this agreement about, I think I wrote it down. It was something along the lines of, I'm a loving wife and mother, and will have a fulfilling career that supports that makes an impact, supports my lifestyle, in so on and so forth. So I don't remember the exact wording, but it was almost like a mantra that I kept repeating myself and singing. And I hadn't looked at it in years. And when I looked at it today, as in preparation for this interview, I thought, wow, I arrived. I got there. Those two-way agreements worked.
It's wonderful. Both of those, I appreciate both of the examples. And you've been actually pulling out some things lately that you've written to yourself, right? Because you pulled out the letter that you wrote when you were getting your
Yeah.
MBA, and you just read that
Yes.
recently. And then you also just pulled out some notes that people you had coached during your MBA program had written to you.
Yeah.
I'm totally off track with our questions, but I think that's powerful to,
Powerful
yeah,
reminders for sure. And I didn't look for them. They just showed up in my life at times. With this letter from my 15-year reunion, I completely forgot that I had
yeah.
written it. And one of my classmates said, "Hey, can you pick up my letter?" I'm like, "My letter? What do you?" I'm getting a letter. And when I opened it up, I thought, "Wow, I was so wise back then." And I was in alignment with my values back then. It feels
Yeah.
full circle that I am in that place
Yes.
again. Yeah.
I have to ask before we move forward, is your brother uh, still in California and a part of your life? And just tell me a little bit about that really quick.
Yeah. So my brother is my older brother. He's in California. And I feel that he's a very important person in my life, and very foundational, especially during the time when we moved. He was the kind of person who, when you're like, you still in La La Land, who is like, hey, this is a picture. It has changed.
He was like the
So
realist, the real older
the
brother.
realist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, all right. Okay. Life has changed.
Yeah.
Get with the program and make the most of it. So he was the kind of the almost the catalyst. And I would say he works very hard. I work very hard. So work is a very strong value in my family. Both of my parents work. My grandmother works. So it is a value that we love and we honor, and we feel that through our work we make a contribution to the world. So I'm super grateful that during this pivotal time he was there for me to get the blindfolds out and be like, get with the program,
Yeah.
because it really got me into
Yeah.
action.
The third critical choice I made was to build trust. I first had to build trust in myself. And you know my backstory, and the people that follow me know my backstory. I mean, there was no trust whatsoever. So I had to build trust in myself first and then inspire the trust of others. I know there have been times in your life in which you had to build trust, for sure, when you first came to the US. As you've reflected on this, is there a time that you would share where you had to build trust in yourself. And then if you remember, how did you do it?
Yeah. I love to answer the question as um, building trust in myself and rebuilding it when
Great.
you lose
Yeah.
it. So when I moved to the US, I was in survival mode. So I didn't have time to sit around and ask, am I confident enough? Do I trust myself enough? Because I needed to support myself, so I was working 3 jobs in high school, one as a tutor, two as hosting at restaurants. I was in ESL classes. So I wanted to, my ticket, to different life was to go to college. So I was on go, go, go mode. Even in college, I was working 20 plus hours in order, a week in order to pay for school. So, and working and doing leadership and running organizations. So it was I didn't have time to be in my head. I had to get through action and be very realistic about my circumstances. And then I remember hearing people, my peers, saying, "Wow, you're so confident." I was like, "Oh, am I confident? Am I coming across as confident?" Yeah, you're so confident. And I think it was because I was already taking action. So trust doesn't. I feel that at least um, that self confidence was not coming from me sitting in a room trying to make myself confident. It was more about getting into action. And through that action, I guess I started showing up differently.
Awesome.
So that was back then, the person I was back then. Later in my career, I lost that. And there was a point in my career where I felt I couldn't recognize myself. And and I just didn't like the person I had become. So when I that forced me to take a really hard look at myself and figure out what happened, where did I go wrong, right? And that's a very scary thing to do, to all of a sudden look at yourself and see, okay, well, now I'm responsible for my circumstances and what happened here. Um, so I engaged a coach, and we did this two-way agreement in order to realign
Okay.
closer with my
Yeah.
values. So there's always, I feel that we have choice. Most of us are in the fortunate position, at least at least in the US, hopefully that we, at some point, we need to make a choice of who we want to become. And for me, I wanted to become somebody different, not the person I had become at that time.
And I can only imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, so just correct me on this. I assume the difficulty in making the choice to leave the high powered Silicon Valley corporate job. You went to Berkeley, you went to Stanford and got your master, your MBA. The, to go from survival mode and getting to what success looked like and was defined by you and others, and then to say, I'm going to go a different course. It's almost seems like so emotionally scary.
Very scary. It was super scary. And there's sometimes there's this voice that is nagging you, and you're like, quiet, quiet, stop it, Let me continue to be on autopilot. And that was me for a
Yep.
number of years. I thought, wow, I worked so hard and to build this, I cannot just walk away. It would be crazy. And it didn't help the external voices already telling me that I was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Like, look at what you
so
have. And not being able to know and see that you knew what you were going to have.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there was also a lot of that was a time when I couldn't recognize myself, right? It was a chef, and it took me a long time to be able to redefine my identity in a way that was felt more inclusive of the different aspects of my
Mhm.
life. So before I was defined only, by my career, and but I became a mom. I became a wife. My mother moved from Peru to the U.S. I became a daughter.
Yeah.
So I and the it was my nature to not my nature, but at this desire to build a community and be able to finally enjoy those relationships that I worked so hard to establish. So, and I wanted to be successful at that. So I ended up. It took years. And working with a coach, and doing a lot of self reflection to redefine who I was in a way that felt a lot more holistic and encompassing of the life I wanted to build.
Do you find when you're coaching clients now, does trust play into that opportunity to grow, needing to build trust in ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Many times what I see is when we want something, typically we're the one, and it's there, it's like waiting for us. We're the ones who are getting in our own way. So we just need to get out of our own way and get into action.
Yeah.
And maybe that thing is there, and maybe it's time to look at it and say, well, not today, maybe in 5 years,
Mm.
right? But not just ignoring it the way I was saying, no, no, no. And then it keeps coming up every so often. But rather being intentional, thoughtful, intentional about the choices we are
Yeah.
making.
One more question on trust, and then I'll move us forward. How does somebody inspire your trust?
Yeah, great question. So I get that question a lot. From leaders, because they want to build high performing teams. I would say it's important for us to reflect, to know what makes us trust other people, and in return, also, what can we do in order to increase trust in given relationships? For example, some elements of trust could be, I want to be I want to be congruent. So incongruence with my values. That's when we're going to be the best leaders, the best human beings, the best parents, the best, we're going to be at our best and we're in alignment with our values. We want to be open. So sometimes, even in the business world, it's like just opening up and experimenting with 1% vulnerability in order to convey that we're human. We're just not robotic, or a walking head. Is we're also a bit, we're human. Um, it that goes with openness. So we also can look at acceptance. At this point, it's like we want to meet people where they are, rather than change them. We cannot change another person. We can only change ourselves and how we interact with that person or that trigger or that circumstance. So it's like not trying to change them by accepting them, not accepting the circumstance, by accepting who they
Hmm.
are, and then adapting our leadership or our style, to be most effective in those types of relationships.
That I hang on to big time. And I think about the example that you just used around acceptance, perhaps not accepting the situation or the circumstance, but accepting the person. That's a lesson, uh, I hope that my 14-year-old daughter, that I instill in her. And, sometimes I always think I have this filter in my head as a mom all the time. Yes, businesswoman, but I also have this filter as a mom all the time. And so I think what you just shared is something that teenage daughters can learn from as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Reliability is another big one. You know, doing what you're
Yeah.
going to say you're going to do during the time that you say you're going to do
Mhm.
it, right? It's like all of those different
And
elements.
in your work, you're working with individuals within a company that need to be working as probably a highly engaged, cohesive team. Or if you're coaching, as an executive coach, one executive, that person needs to show up and create and inspire and motivate and build
Mhm.
trust with those individuals that need to be working as a cohesive team. And it starts with one person, and it could,
Yes.
permeate. So you actually started leading me to the fourth question or the fourth critical choice when you were sharing some building trust. And the fourth critical choice I made was to create community and belonging. And for me, I, as a kid, never had belonging. And then when I was 30 and I had created more professional success than whatever than I could have imagined, I realized that that was great, but my definition of success was changing and evolving. And what I really wanted was to be a friend and to have friends. I wanted community. And so I went on a journey to create community and belonging. It really struck me what you said at the beginning, and I'm not going to get your words right, but when you were talking about your childhood and going from Peru to LA or Peru to the US, the inverse of the your home in Peru was filled of love and joy and belonging. And
Yes.
then you had to flee that and be placed where you didn't belong at all. Okay, I'll stop. I don't want to tell your story. Will you share will you share what it feels like to not belong?
Yeah, it feels very lonely. It absolutely feels very lonely. And there's a lot of research that shows that it actually impacts, our bodies. It actually impacts our health, not only our mental health, also our physical health.
Mm.
So it's a very lonely place to be. And similarly, I've been on a journey to get to that place of belonging because my first at the beginning it was all about survival, basic needs covered, right? And I also didn't have I had friends, but I didn't have my mother was in Peru, my father had passed away, I didn't have a husband, didn't
And
have
you
a
couldn't be
child.
there when your dad passed away.
In fact, I couldn't be there. So I sought belonging at work, through my colleagues. It was through, doing work together that I try to find my work family. And in some cases, they were healthy work families, and in some cases, they were not, right? But I didn't realize how big of a craving it was until many years later when I became a coach. And I thought, why did I tolerate that? But it was because that was the only family I had in Silicon Valley when I was by myself. So um, now it is different. I feel that the relationships that I have most closely to me are relationships that I've been very intentional about, and I'm very mindful of nurturing those relationships. And I'm also on a quest to continue
Yeah.
strengthening those relationships within our community, not only making that impact, on my clients who I absolutely love, also making an impact at a local level, through my daughter's
Yeah.
schooling and church and other avenues.
So will you tell me a little bit more, because I'm always interested in the different communities that support your journey to enduring success. So school, church, yeah, just tell me a little bit more about the communities you're involved in.
Yeah, so my daughter goes to a very small school, and it almost feels like homeschooling, but bigger. And I'm realizing, and at the beginning, I thought, okay, just leave your daughter there, work, and then pick up your daughter, right? So that was my mode. It's like the school seems great.
Yeah.
Uh, and what I learned, then she had some challenges with bullying. So I got involved. My husband got more involved. And we were given the advice to
Hmm.
volunteer to see what's happening. So I started volunteering, and it became more, it actually, the byproduct of it was, wow, I started building community. I got to know the teachers, I got to know the principal. The principal is amazing. Um, and she was a businesswoman before as well. And I've introduced her to some of my classmates. Actually, there's a classmate who's building a micro school, and
Wow.
so there's all of a sudden this situation that was unfortunate at that time. We all grew from it. Ended up having all of these positive elements or byproducts of getting to know not only the teachers and the principal, the other parents as well, then being able to make actually business
Yeah,
connections as well, to support other people who are on this, who are also doing amazing things in the world.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. I love that. And it just shows the manifestation of how community is
Yeah.
formed because it requires
Yeah.
action. You talked about action before, and action's a big part, I think, of your philosophy. Take action. And I think it does require action. Um,
And
yeah.
it also requires trade-off,
Ooh,
right? Because time is not unlimited, it's not infinite. So it's where do we focus our time? Where do we focus our attention? And what, given the state of our lives where we are today. Before, when I was young, I was involved in a number of different things in the community. Now that I'm married and we have a young child, it's different. So we need to be very, I am trying to be a lot more thoughtful about where I dedicate my
yeah.
time.
Because it's an investment,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And
But if community is
it's
important,
important.
that's what
Yeah,
investment is. Yeah.
we've had these conversations in our little one-on-ones that we like to have where you can get sucked into spending your time in areas that aren't in service of you, your family, your values, your whatever it is, and catching ourselves on that. I want to go back to belonging just for a second with you. With two things, and this is community and belonging, but two things that have popped in my mind in conversation specifically with you is when you have felt like you didn't belong. And that could be any time in your life, could be at whatever last month. It does I don't just mean when you were growing up in high school, but when you felt like you didn't belong. Do you recall someone taking action, someone else doing something that in that moment helped you feel a sense of belonging in that moment? It doesn't necessarily mean it shifted overnight, but do you recall?
Oh, absolutely. I was applying to MBA school. So I was writing all these like essays that are very introspective to send them to different schools. And there was a question about identity, like who I was. I wrestled with that at that time. This was 10 years, being in the US. And I felt I didn't belong in Peru because I wasn't Peruvian enough anymore. But I was not American. So I remember going back to Peru and people would ask me, "Where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from here, I'm from Peru." It's like, no, but you haven't lived here in a while. So all of a
And
sudden
I'm
I
sure you were
became
different.
a
You
different
had
person.
changed. Yeah.
And in the US, people would ask me, I have an accent. It's like, "Oh, where are you from?" So I was neither here nor there.
Yeah.
And, and at that point, as I was talking with a friend who was also an immigrant, I remember the words like, "Well, we're hybrids."
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, we're hybrids. And I can take the things that I love the most from here, and the things that I love the most from here, and create my own. So, from that conversation, one, it was super helpful to hear those words. And two, it felt to me that at that point, I decided I belong to
Hmm.
myself, and eventually I will find my tribe. But this is who I am, with, my shades, colors, quirks, and all of the above.
Thank you for expanding on that. The other thing that popped in my mind, and so for sure, I'm going to direct people to Advent coaching because I think leaders that are interested in. So the second thing that came to my mind is you work with companies and executives to help think about and execute on creating a more diverse leadership style or more diversity in their leadership. Am I right? Is that still a focus of you in Advent coaching? And I think you're uniquely qualified to help executives think through that. So I'm going to direct people to you, but is there one thing, and I'm putting you totally on the spot, but is there one thing that pops in your mind as a leader to be thinking about as it relates to creating perhaps more inclusivity or a little bit of moments of belonging as a leader?
Yeah. So, well, one of the, we talk about this with leaders of, all the time. The most important component to build a high performing team is psychological
Mm,
safety, which means that I'm able to speak about, problems that I'm seeing or mistakes or complaints without the fear that I'm going to be retaliated against. Well, one of the four components of psychological safety is diversity and inclusion. And we don't just mean like racial or ethnic diversity. We mean like diversity of thought, diversity of
yeah.
experience, diversity of input, right? Because we are in, for at least most of the jobs that I work with, or professionals in those fields, they're hiring people because they're bringing, either potential, or they're bringing a lot of
Yeah.
experience, like a lot of, and we want that value, we want that knowledge, we want that experience, so they need to be able to speak up. And especially in fields that are highly innovative, like technology, like where there's a lot of innovation, we need to be able to have that diversity of input.
Mhm.
I remember I worked at a company where, we had this big camera that went out, and the feedback was that it was not capturing people who with dark skin, right? So it's like, wow, how did we miss the mark on that? It's like, let's iteration and number two, and it's like, okay, let's have a camera that captures. So these are the misses that we can have when we don't have that diverse input, and that actually have a tangible business
Yeah.
impact,
Yeah.
right? So we want to make sure that we are capturing. Doesn't mean that we have to go to with this opinion or this opinion, but at least we have a more global sense of the bigger picture.
Thank you for that. I'm going to take us to the fifth and final choice on my journey, which really is the most important choice. So sometimes I think I should just start with this one. But because my journey was linear, the fifth critical choice that I made was to embrace my boundless capacity to love, and not love the emotion, not the love that we innately felt when Lily or Sophia, when we knew we had them, but the action, love the verb, choosing in every interaction to give my love and to receive the love that others want to give me. And I think love the verb manifests different for different people in different situations all the time. So when I say love the verb, how does that manifest? Is there an example that you would give me of how love the verb manifests in your world?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples. One personal, one professional. So in the personal, when you have a child, is boundless love
Mm,
on the receiving end through all these cuddles and hugs, which is amazing. But it's also on the giving end, right? Almost now every decision we make is to what is best for our family. And the times when not everything is rosy, there are challenges along the way, but the love is still there, and it doesn't have to be earned. It's just freely given to this beautiful human being that we are responsible for. At work, how it manifests sometimes in tough love. So when I am there with clients, I feel a very high sense of duty to do my work and what's in service of them. So that sometimes that means putting a mirror for sort of reflection and show what I'm noticing, or it could mean giving difficult messages, like giving feedback of how I'm experiencing them or how their team is
mhm,
experiencing them if we did a 360. So it is about sometimes when they're saying, "Yeah, I want to, I'm here, I want to get to this goal," and then they're telling the same story over and over again. It is about, hey, like, let's wake up. What's happening here? And holding them accountable, right? Sometimes if we're working with big teams, the love manifests in, well, everybody is like creating this culture where nobody knows what the rules of engagement are. Let's define them. Then let's have those hard conversations. They're not happy, they're not relaxing, they're not comfortable. It is doing the hard work of leadership because it's really hard. And that is how the love manifests itself.
I
It's not gonna
love
be,
that example.
it's not a it's work.
It's work. And you know what? Just to say this, like, you're a fabulous executive coach too. Because sometimes human nature is to be like, oh, but I'm going to withhold that love because I don't want to make you feel bad.
Yeah.
Or I don't want you not to like me. Or what if it goes wrong? And what you were so succinctly saying is, oh, like, give it to them. That, and especially as an executive coach or any consultant, you got to get into it and just do it. And I appreciate that manifestation of love. Natalie, I literally could spend so much more time with you. We've been having an ongoing conversation together for months now as we connect with each other and support each other and value each other as professionals, as moms, as wives, as friends. I believe with my whole heart that when we choose to show up in every interaction, giving love and receiving love, which is what you have done with me today, that's when we create enduring success. And not just for ourselves, but for all of those people that are around us. You are an inspiration. And like, you shared so much, and there's just still so much more to learn from Natalie. So I will direct people to you in Advent Coaching, but thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Thank you, Trish. And I feel your love too. So thank you.
Everyone, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. To check out more episodes, go to www.trishkendall.com/podcast. Or go to any of your favorite podcast channels, including YouTube, under Trish Kendall Speaks, and you'll find this interview and more. Choose and become.